Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. Chapter 1. Matchmaking mamas are united in their glee. Colin Bridgerton has returned from Greece. For those gentle and ignorant readers who are new to town this year, Mr. Bridgerton is third in the legendary string of 8 Bridgerton siblings, hence the name Colin. Beginning with C, he follows Anthony and Benedict and precedes Daphne, Eloise, Francisca, Gregory, and Hyacinth. Although Mr. Bridgerton holds no noble title and is unlikely ever to do so, he is seventh in line for the title of Viscount Bridgerton, behind the two sons of the current Viscount, his elder brother Benedict, and his 3 sons. He is still considered as one of the prime catches of the season due to his fortune, his face, his form, and most of all, his charm. It is difficult, however, to predict whether Mr. Bridgerton will succumb to matrimonial bliss this season. He is certainly of an age to marry, 3 and 30. But he has never shown a decided interest in any lady of proper parentage, and to make matters even more complicated, he has an appalling tendency to leave London at the drop of a hat, bound for some exotic destination. Lady Whistledown's Society Papers, 2nd April 1824. Look at this! Portia Featherington squealed. Colin Bridgerton is back. Penelope looked up from her needlework. Her mother was clutching the latest edition of Lady Whistledown's Society Papers, the way Penelope might clutch, say, a rope while hanging off a building. "I know," she murmured. Portia frowned. She hated when anyone, was aware of the gossip before she was. "How did you get to Whistledown before I did? I told Bradley to set it aside for me and not let anyone touch." "I didn't see it in Whistledown," Penelope interrupted, before her mother went off to castigate the poor, beleaguered butler. "Felicity told me yesterday afternoon," Hyacinth Bridgerton told her. "Your sister spends a great deal of time over at the Bridgerton household." "As to why?" Penelope pointed out, wondering where this was leading. Portia tapped her finger against the side of her chin, as she always did when she was plotting or scheming. "Colin Bridgerton is of an age to be looking for a wife." Penelope managed to blink just before her eyes bugged right off her head. "Colin Bridgerton is not going to marry Felicity." Portia gave a little shrug. "Stranger things have happened." "Not that I've ever seen," Penelope muttered. "Anthony Bridgerton married that Kate Sheffield girl, and she was even less popular than you." "That wasn't exactly true," Penelope rather, though they had been on equally low rungs of the social ladder. But there seemed little point in telling this to her mother, who probably thought she had complimented her third daughter by saying she would not been the least popular girl that season. Penelope felt her lips tightening. Her mother's compliments had a habit of landing rather like wasp. "Do not think I meant to criticize," Portia said, suddenly all concerned. "In truth, I'm glad for your spinsterhood. I'm alone in this world save for my daughters, and it's comforting to know that one of you shall be able to care for me in my old years." Penelope had a vision of the future as described by her mother, and she had a sudden urge to run out and marry the chimney sweep. She had long since resigned herself to a life of eternal spinsterhood, but somehow she had always pictured herself off in her own neat little terrace house, or maybe a snug cottage by the sea. But lately, Portia had been peppering her conversations with references to her old age and how lucky she was that Penelope could care for her. Never mind that both Prudence and Philippa had married well-heeled men and possessed ample funds to see to their mother's every comfort. Oh, that Portia was more readily wealthy in her own right, and her family had settled money on her as a dowry. 1/4 had been set aside for her own personal account. No, when Portia talked about being cared for, she wasn't referring to money. What Portia wanted was a slave. Penelope sighed. She was being overly harsh with her mother, if only in her own mind. She did that too often. Her mother loved her. She knew her mother loved her, and she loved her mother back. It was just that sometimes she didn't much like her mother. She hoped that didn't make her a bad person. But truly, her mother could try the patience of even the kindest, gentlest of daughters. And as Penelope was the first to admit, she could be a wee bit sarcastic at times. "Why don't you think Colin would marry Felicity?" Portia asked. Penelope looked up, startled. She would, though they were done with that subject. She should have known better. Her mother was nothing if not tenacious. "Well," she said slowly, "to begin with, she's 12 years younger than he is." "Pooh," Portia said, waving her hand dismissively. "That's nothing, and you know it." Penelope frowned and yelped as she accidentally stabbed her finger with her needle. "Besides," Portia continued bluntly, "he's..." She looked back down at the whistlewood down and scanned it for his exact age. 3 and 30. How is he meant to avoid a 12-year difference between him and his wife? Surely you don't expect him to marry someone your age? Penelope sucked on her abused finger even though she knew it was hopelessly uncouth to do so. But she needed to put something in her mouth to keep her from saying something horrible and horribly spiteful. Everything her mother said was true. Many attend weddings, maybe even most of them saw men marrying girls a dozen or more years their junior. But somehow, age gap between Colin and Felicity seemed even larger, perhaps because Penelope was unable to keep the disgust off her face. "She's like a sister to him, a little sister." "Really, Penelope? I hardly think." "It's almost incestuous," Penelope muttered. "What did you say?" Penelope snatched up her needlework again. "Nothing." "I'm sure you said something." Penelope shook her head. "I did clear my thought. Perhaps you heard." "I heard you saying something. I'm sure of it." Penelope groaned. Her life loomed long and tedious ahead of her. "Mother," she said, with the patience of, if not a saint, at least a very devout nun, "Felicity is practically engaged to Mr. Albensteele." Portia actually began rubbing her hands together. "She won't be engaged to him if she can catch Colin Bridgerton. Felicity would die before chasing after Colin." "Of course not. She's a smart girl. Anyone can see that Colin Bridgerton is a better catch." "But Felicity loves Mr. Albensteele." Portia deflated into her perfectly upholstered chair. "There is that. And," Penelope added with great feeling, "Mr. Albensteele is in a possession of a perfectly respectable fortune." Portia tapped her index finger against her cheek. "True not?" she said sharply. As respectable as a Bridgerton potion, but it's nothing to sneeze at, I suppose. People knew it was time to let it go, but she couldn't stop her mouth from opening one last time. In all truth, Mother, he's a wonderful match for Felicity. We should be delighted for her. I know, Portia grumbled. It's just that I so wanted one of my daughters to marry a Bridgerton. What a coup! I would be the talk of London for weeks, years maybe. Penelope stabbed her needle into the cushion beside her. It was a rather foolish way to vent her anger, but the alternative was to jump to her feet and yell. What about me? Portia seemed to think that once Felicity was wed, her hopes for a Bridgerton union were forever dashed. But Penelope was still unmarried. Didn't that count for anything? Was it so much to wish that her mother thought of her with the same pride she felt for her other 3 daughters? Penelope knew that Colin wasn't going to choose her as his bride, but shouldn't a mother be at least a little bit blind to her children's faults? It was obvious to Penelope that neither Prudence, Philippa, nor even Felicity had ever had a chance with the Bridgerton. Why did her mother seem to think their charms so exceeded Penelope's? Very well, Penelope had to admit that Felicity enjoyed a popularity that exceeded that of her 3 older sisters combined. But Prudence and Philippa had never been incomparables. They would owned the perimeters of ballrooms just as much as Penelope had. Except, of course, that they were married now. Penelope wouldn't want to cleave herself unto either of their husbands, but at least they were wives. Thankfully, however, Portia's mind had already moved on to greener pastures. I must pay a call upon Violet. She was saying she'll be so relieved that Colin is back. I'm sure Lady Bridgerton will be delighted to see you, Penelope said. That poor woman, Portia said, her side dramatic. She worries about him, you know. I know. Truly, I think it is more than a mother should be expected to bear. He goes gallivanting about, the good Lord only knows where, to countries that are positively unheathen. I believe that they practice Christianity in Greece, Penelope murmured, her eyes back down on her needlework. Don't be impertinent. Penelope and Featherington, and they are Catholics. Portia shuddered on the word. They are not Catholics at all, Penelope replied, giving up on the needlework and setting it aside. They are Greek Orthodox. Well, they are not Church of England, Portia said with a sniff. Seeing as how they are Greek, I don't think they are terribly worried about that. Portia's eye narrowly, disapprovingly goes away. And how do you know about this Greek religion anyway? No, don't tell me, she said with a dramatic flourish. You read it somewhere. Penelope just blinked as she tried to think of a suitable reply. I wish you wouldn't read me so much, Portia sighed. I probably could have married you years ago if you had concentrated more on the social grace and less on, Penelope had to ask. Less on what? I don't know. Whatever it is to you that has you staring into space and daydreaming so often? I'm just thinking, Penelope said quietly. Sometimes I just like to stop and think. Stop what? Portia wanted to know. Penelope couldn't help but smile. Portia's query seemed to sum up all that was different between mother and daughter. It's nothing, mother, Penelope said. Really? Portia looked as if she wanted to say more, then thought that better of it. Or maybe she was just hungry. She did plug a biscuit off the tea tray and pop it into her mouth. Penelope started to reach out to take the last biscuit for herself, then decided to let her mother have it. She might as well keep her mother's mouth full. The last thing she wanted was to find herself in another conversation about Colin Bridgerton.